A lot of talk about what the San Francisco 49ers are doing in free agency, letting a lot of players go and not bringing in any really big time names. But one ESPN analyst, Ryan Clark, says the San Francisco 49ers should stop tiptoeing around the rebuild and just go all in and trade Christian McCaffrey. So rather than like playing a clip like I typically would, it's pretty straightforward. I can just paraphrase it for you. He says the 49ers should trade Christian McCaffrey, go all in on this rebuild and blow it up and start over. But the thing is Christian McCaffrey isn't the piece that would determine a rebuild or not. Yes, he would be a big part of it, but what Ryan is missing the boat here is that there's two players that will have any type of correlation to whether this is a retool, reset, or a rebuild. Now, these words that we've been throwing around, and when fans hear the rebuild word, it causes concern because, as that states, kind of like what Kyle Shanahan did when he took over in 2017, along with John Lynch, is they blew up the roster, got rid of a ton of guys. I mean, Navarro Bowman got let go. They just wiped the roster clean and started over, aka a rebuild. But what Ryan Clark, in my opinion, is missing when talking about, oh, you should trade Christian McCaffrey. I mean, first of all, if you trade Christian McCaffrey, you're trading him off a year where he played 3.5 games and was injured. He has bilateral Achilles tendonitis, then a knee injury that ended his season. You would be getting the worst possible value for a player that you had just paid in the offseason. So that's not the player that you should be discussing in a trade for a potential rebuild. It's Brock Purdy and George Kittle, the two biggest names that we at least know are in contract negotiations. Because as I've discussed, the players who are in contract negotiations, their percentage chance or probability of getting traded is significantly higher than someone who is under contract. Obviously, there are very specific details that go into all of the reasons of why someone may or may not be traded. But if we're just going to take a high level overview of this, a rebuild wouldn't necessarily consist, of just like, oh, trade Christian McCaffrey. A rebuild would consist of trading Brock Purdy, of trading George Kittle, both players who are in contract negotiations, who, if you pay, are on this team for a minimum of 3 more years. So if the 49ers are going to be rebuilding, yes, Christian McCaffrey, of course, throw him into the mix, Trent Williams into the mix, throw those guys. But keep in mind, they've already been paid. They got paid last year. It's Brock Purdy and George Kittle who are trying to get paid now. And so the question becomes, if the 49ers are really going to go all in on a rebuild, wouldn't you say they would trade Brock and trade George? Because as it stands right now, George is coming off a phenomenal season. You still assume that George is going to have some good years left. To me, he's the best tight end in the NFL right now. And, if you're putting your Parag Marate hat on and you're like, well, we're blowing this thing up, that's where you're starting. You're starting with George and Brock. And now I want to make it abundantly clear, I'm not saying that they should do that. I'm not advocating for this. I'm speaking to Ryan Clark, who's saying that the 49ers should go rebuild mode and trade Christian McCaffrey. And I don't think that's the first place you start if you're going rebuild. Because again, there becomes more challenges with trading his particular contract based on the fact that he's fresh off of inking a contract extension along with Trent. So that's why, like, I haven't called this a rebuild. I've said it's a mini rebuild because there's clearly a shift happening. A clear deviation from the former players that were here, letting them go in free agency, and kind of resetting this. They're not like throwing a bunch of money at these free agents to come in and, like they did with Javon Hargrave and situations like that in the past. They're kind of stripping down the roster a little bit to then kind of what to me build it back up. But they're doing that so with key pieces all across the roster. And the thing is that's what makes this still somewhat optimistic that the 49ers could get back on track, is because with a good draft, you can plug a couple of these holes, if not more. We saw Malik Mustafa take over as a starter, Renardo Green take over as a starter. We saw Dominic Pooney take over as a starter, and even Isaac Guerrero, after his way through injury, was starting at the end of the year. So it's not a crazy situation to believe that like rookies can't come in and perform. I mean, look at Cooper DeJean in the Super Bowl. Rookies can come out and have phenomenal years all the time. It's just about finding the right guys that fit the right system in the right moment in the right environment. So the thing is, if you're going full rebuild, it's not Christian McCaffrey. It's Brock and George. That's the rebuild. Those are your like key foundational pieces right now, because think of what they represent. Brock is your franchise quarterback. George Kittle's the longest tenured San Francisco 49er, who is probably the face of the 49ers right now. He's one of the faces of the entire NFL. So to me, again, just to push back, it's like, yes, you could trade Christian McCaffrey, but that's not a full rebuild. The full rebuild consists of the quarterback and the star tight end, and I hope that doesn't happen. I hope that both George Kittle and Brock Purdy can get their deals done. I hope that part of what we are seeing is kind of a reset to be able to build around these guys. George Kittle has I think a 20 million plus cap hit heading into this year. And you could spread that cap hit out. So there's more room. There's more room for the 49ers to get some stuff done. So, yes, if you're going to go at full rebuild, you probably would shop Christian McCaffrey, but the first place you're starting is not there. You're starting with Brock. You're starting with George. Then you're going Trent. Then you're going CMC. Then you're going Juwan Jennings, because as we know, Juwan Jennings might be in the middle of a contract negotiation that we don't know about. So then, because he's heading into the final year of his 2-year deal, so that would be another guy. Throw Nick Bosa onto the mix, but they did pay Diamador Lenore last year, so they still want some pieces around. I just think that people are overreacting a little bit to this situation, and I think Ryan Clark is one of them. But you guys let me know what you think in the comments below, and as always, make sure to like and subscribe for more updates.